Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a first look at the all-new Ayn Odin 2. I've been really excited about this one, mainly because of the chipset they opted to use, and just knowing what kind of performance this can put out, I think this is going to be an absolutely amazing little handheld. Now obviously, the one I have here is their transparent purple version. I personally call it Atomic Purple. And you can see we've got some RGB LEDs around the analog sticks and down the sides. Now with these transparent versions, you will see some hot spots, but keep in mind they do offer solid versions. They've got white, they've got the retro and the black. The RGB is going to be much more uniform on the solid versions. So yeah, I'm really surprised with what they've done here. I personally think it looks really good, and this thing is putting out some amazing performance. Now initially when this was announced, I didn't think they'd be using such a powerful chipset, but this does have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. So at the time of making this video, it is the most powerful Android handheld on the market right now. And just taking a look at the overall design, you can see that this is a much smaller handheld than a lot of the x86 handhelds on the market, which makes it really comfortable to hang on to for long periods of time. And when it comes to I/O, down here at the bottom, we do have a 3.5mm audio jack and USB Type-C for charging the battery up, syncing the device to your PC, and it will do 4K 60 video out. So we've got a full function USB-C down here. Up top, we've got a micro SD compartment and micro HDMI. Now this will only do 1080p 60, so if I do connect this to a larger display, I'll probably be using that USB-C on the bottom. And finally, over here, our volume rocker and our power button. So like I mentioned, the Odin 2 is a very comfortable handheld, and it's coming in really thin compared to x86. But remember, we're rocking an ARM chip here, and it's running Android, so we're not going to be able to do the things we can do on something like the Steam Deck. But given the chipset they opted to use here, this thing is going to be great for emulation, native Android gaming, and even cloud gaming. And when it comes to battery life, this is going to far exceed the x86 counterparts on the market right now because we are using an ARM CPU. Now when it comes to the specs of the new Odin 2, for the CPU, we've got that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. This is an 8-core SoC. We've got one Cortex-X3 core running at 3.2 GHz, two A715 cores running at 2.8, two A710 cores running at 2.8, and three A510 cores running at 2 GHz. We also have the Adreno 740 GPU. It's got active cooling built in, so we don't need to worry about thermal throttling, and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 can definitely reach the maximum performance for long periods of time. You can pick this up in a few different storage and RAM variants, 8 gigs up to 16, but all of them are going to be using really fast LPDDR5X Ram. When it comes to storage, 128 up to 512, and it's using UFS 4.0. I did some transfers from an external SSD to the internal storage, and I couldn't believe how fast everything went. This UFS 4.0 is crazy fast. We'll take a look at a disk benchmark, but when it comes to the display, we've got a 6-inch IPS at 1920 by 1080, dual front-facing stereo speakers, and these are some of the first devices to come to market with Wi-Fi 7. This offers blazingly fast wireless speeds. Again, we will take a look at some benchmarks there. It's got Bluetooth 5.3, an 8,000 mAh battery with 45 watt quick charging capabilities, and this is running Android 13, plus we've got the Odin launcher right out of the box. Okay, so first and foremost, this is an Android device. As you can see, very reminiscent of kind of a Pixel phone. We've got the rounded icons, so you can change all this if you want to. We also have full access to Google Play. Don't have to do any kind of setup or anything like that. All you need to do is sign in. You can download your favorite apps directly from there. But Ayn has added a lot of settings specifically designed for this handheld, like fan control, RGB. We've got some performance settings. Plus, we've got the Odin launcher here. So from here, we can add different applications. We can add our emulators, our games. There's also a section for entertainment in case you want to watch some videos and things like that. You can have your apps separated. We can fully customize these icons and the background. I'm on the light theme and I haven't added a wallpaper to the background yet. I think the simple launcher looks really good. Swiping from the right-hand side will open up our category settings. So we can go to entertainment, productivity. Usually I'm just going to be stuck on games here. We've also got our performance settings, so we can go to normal, performance, or high performance, and basically this is just going to allow us to clock that CPU higher for a longer period of time. We've got some RGB controls, so we can disable those side RGBs directly from within the Odin launcher, but we've also got a lot more settings right down here. This is going to bring us into the Odin settings, and we've got a lot more that we can work with. like changing the color of the RGB. We can also disable it completely. And I'm on earlier firmware. One thing that I wish was here already was brightness control. It will be added in the future, but right now we're kind of stuck at this brightness. Would have been nice to kind of lower this just a bit. But by the time this releases to everybody, that should be fixed. So yeah, the Odin launcher just adds kind of a simple launcher so we can get to everything really easily. Now from within Android, if we swipe down from the very top, we can get to all of the extra settings that we need to mess around with, like our RGB control, fan control, and performance. And with this, we actually have 4 different settings: normal, performance, and high performance. Obviously, high performance is where it's going to be at to get the most out of the Odin 2, but this does automatically enable that fan to sport mode, which does get a bit louder. Nothing compared to these x86 handhelds, but it's nice to have this, that way we won't thermal throttle. Another cool feature they added is charging separation. So basically, if you know you're going to have this plugged into the wall, you can turn this on, and it's not going to affect your battery. You're just going to be pulling all the power from the wall to run this unit. We've also got some more basic settings like auto rotate, force landscape, battery saver, do not disturb, just the normal stuff we get with Android. But yeah, so far, software's coming along really nicely, given that this is earlier firmware. I'm sure in the future, we will see more features added, especially when more people get their hands on these, more requested features. One thing I kind of really want right now is just brightness control for those LEDs, but that will be coming hopefully in the next update. And by the way, yeah, we do have OTA updates directly from Odin on the Odin 2. And you can see here that our video output over HDMI is only 1080p 60, but over USB 4K 60. We can also easily swap our button layout. So right now it's kind of, Switch style. They're calling it Odin. From here, we can change it to Xbox, and that's the one I like. So I'm going to swap that out here. We can map our rear buttons. So we've got that M1 and M2 button. You can choose what you'd like it to do. And one other cool feature here is just our on-screen mouse. So we can use this left analog stick to control the mouse cursor on screen. So that was just a quick software overview. Now I want to show you a few more things. We're going to test out how fast this battery can charge, the Wi-Fi 7, internal write and read speeds, then we'll run some benchmarks, and finally get into some game and emulation testing. Okay, so battery charging. They state that this will do up to 45 watts. In my test, I've hit 40 watts. And in all actuality, it really depends what kind of voltage our PD is putting out. But at 9 volts, 3.5 amps, we're looking at around 2.5 to 3 hours to charge the battery up. Not too bad. The next thing I wanted to take a look at were these Wi-Fi speeds. And we could run a theoretical test, but I personally like running real-world tests from my home network. I've got a Wi-Fi 6 router and gig internet. I'm basically maxing out what my router can put out right now. And yeah, the Wi-Fi 7 in here is working amazingly. 708 down, 910 upload. Next thing I wanted to take a look at were just the speeds of this UFS 4.0 storage. And keep in mind, this is the 512 gigabyte version. The lower storage variants may be a bit faster. They might be a bit slower. But what I have here, sequential read, 2,652 megabytes per second, and a sequential write of 1,071 megabytes per second. These are some great speeds for internal storage on an Android device for sure. Moving over to some performance benchmarks, the first one we have here is Geekbench 6, single core 2055, multi 5723. Next, we've got a GPU benchmark with 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme. On the Odin 2, total score 3,722, and just to put this into perspective for you, on the Odin 1 with the Snapdragon 845, Wildlife Extreme only scored a 622. So this is a significant uplift from the original Odin 1 when it comes to GPU performance. And the final thing I ran here was Antutu. We got a total score of 1,594,666. Definitely up there in the top tier when it comes to running these Antutu benchmarks. And on the Odin 1 with that Snapdragon 845, 438,139. Now it's time to jump into some native Android gaming. And first up, we've got Minecraft. I actually just kind of started this to show you a few more features here. Swiping over from the right-hand side while you're playing any game will bring up our in-game settings. We can turn on Do Not Disturb, we can record the screen, we can set up a screenshot, clean the memory. It also gives us a look at our CPU usage, CPU temperature, and FPS. Plus, we've got an on-screen mapper, so for games that don't support native controllers on Android, we can set up touch points on the screen and map them to the built-in controls here. Plus, we've got a real-time on-screen FPS counter, which comes in really handy for testing these games, be it emulators or native Android games. But of course, when it comes to Minecraft, it's going to run it just fine. We're not going to have an issue there. We've got more than enough power, and next up, we've got Asphalt 9. This is one of those games that just works with the controller. We don't need any on-screen mapper. I'm maxed out from the settings here. Looks great, plays just fine. And if you wanted to play with the built-in gyro, you always could. I'm just not a huge fan of gyro, so I always like, real physical controls. But this is one of those games that's been out for a while. It's very well optimized, so let's move over to something else. We've got Call of Duty Mobile. Now with this game here, it only works with certain controllers, like official Xbox controllers. There are a few third parties that work, but luckily we've got the built-in key mapper. So we can move these around anywhere on screen. We can set our analogs up for view or movement. And overall, for the games that need it, it works out really well. Now I will tell you, you might need to turn the sensitivity down a bit, but you can definitely adjust it to your liking. And by the way, with Call of Duty Mobile here, we're at the highest settings and highest frame rate. We've only got a 60 Hz display, so we can get up to 60 here, but the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 can run basically any Android game from the market, no problem at all, even Genshin Impact. We're at the highest settings, 60 FPS. I've got that on-screen FPS counter right there in the middle, so you can see we're right there on 60. Got a couple dips every once in a while, and that's because I'm at the highest settings here with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. But this is really great performance for a little Android handheld, and it looks awesome at this resolution. So yeah, this thing's putting down some really great performance when it comes to native Android games. But the next thing we need to test is some emulation, and I will have a full emulation video coming up, but I wanted to show off some higher end stuff running first. PSP using the standalone version of PPSSPP, God of War, Ghost of Sparta, 4x resolution. So we are at a 1080p native resolution, constant 60 FPS. I've got both frame counters up just so you can see. And the built-in controls just work with these emulators, no problem at all. So for PSP emulation, this thing has more than enough power to do it. As long as the game's compatible with the emulator, you're going to be able to run it at full speed and upscale. Next on the list, we've got some GameCube emulation with one of the harder ones to emulate on mobile, F-Zero GX. Native resolution, OpenGL backend, and we're on that Fire Field track, which really gives these ARM SoCs a run for its money. But yeah, you can see this is running at full speed, looking at some really great GameCube and Wii performance on the Odin 2. PS2 is another one that performs really well on this chipset. Ratchet & Clank, we're at 2x resolution. I'm using the Vulkan backend, and I didn't notice any kind of issues with this game here. I also went through and tested God of War, but I wanted to kind of save that for, my full emulation video. There's a bunch of games here that are going to run just fine on the Odin 2 when it comes to PS2 using the Aether SX2 emulator. And the final thing I wanted to show off here was some Switch emulation using YUZU. Now I've gone through and I've tested a bunch of Switch games, and this thing is one of the best performing Android devices when it comes to Switch emulation so far. And it really comes down to being able to take that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 up to those maximum clocks and keeping it there because we've got active cooling. But keep in mind, YUZU on Android is still a bit early. There are some games that still have issues, but I've got a lot to test in my next video, so definitely stay tuned. So yeah, the new Odin 2 is definitely an amazing performer when it comes to native Android gaming and emulation. And of course, since we've got Wi-Fi 7, should be really great for cloud gaming. If that's something you want to see tested, just let me know in the comments below. But I've been having a good time with this thing. Everything that I kind of wanted out of the device is here, especially that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. And it is by far the most powerful dedicated Android handheld that we've tested on the channel, but I'm sure when the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or whatever they call it comes out, we'll see something a bit more powerful. But for now, the Odin 2 is an amazing little device. But that's going to wrap it up for this first look video. I will have a couple more coming up, so if there's anything you want to see running on the Odin 2, just let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy videos like this, it'd be really cool if you could hit that like button or think about subscribing. But that's it for this one. Like always, thanks for watching.